officially welcome you to today's webinar, Elements of a Recruitment Plan. I'm Jessica Birch with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Assisting me today are our partners, Amy Kanata and Scott Weinrobe from Education Northwest. You'll see us in the chat and the Q&A to assist you during today's session and to help get your questions answered. We are also delighted today to have Cynthia Henderson with us. Cynthia Henderson has over 27 years experience in the fields of organizational development, supervision and management, higher education administration, and community development. Ms. Henderson has guided government agencies, colleges and universities, corporations, and nonprofit organizations through the process of effective supervision and communication. I'll provide a snapshot of what we'll cover today, and then I'll pass it over to Cynthia. Here is what we hope you'll get out of this webinar. We'd like you to be able to outline the elements of a recruitment plan, describe the tools and key milestones to support the candidate through the application process, identify sponsor and sub-site staff roles for recruitment, and populate a sample recruitment timeline based on the anticipated PSO date. Now I'm going to go turn it over to Cynthia.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to connect with you, and I'd like to start our session today by reviewing the stages of Vista recruitment, the process. So we'll begin by looking at each stage in depth throughout this session. So a good place to start is really to acknowledge that we have a variety of approaches for recruitment depending on your role. For example, we have intermediaries, single-site supervisors, sub-site supervisors, who may be involved with the recruitment in a variety of ways depending on your project, but we'll talk more about that later. I do want to share that we have a valuable resource, the Vista, that you're going to be getting. And I want you to think about, what do you want that Vista to do? What impact do you want that Vista to have? And remember, the way you start out is the way you're going to end up. So let's look at some of the project goals and outcomes. So one of the key things that you may want to consider doing is to get clear about what your goals are before you get started. So what do we want to achieve? Remember, you have 3 years to achieve your project goal. And each year of Vista may be doing different things. So what skills and talents and abilities do they need to have in year 1 to focus on achieving the goal, year 2, and year 3? They all may be different, but you have to recruit for all of those skill sets for those different approaches. So looking at that, you may want to also identify the special skills and knowledge needed for the position. Now, I just have to add here that it is so critical to look at the soft skills. Yes, there's some things that you can teach them when they get there, but there's some things they need to have. And to have a really, really good Vista, it's important to really focus on, do they have the interpersonal skills to connect with your community and your volunteers and your staff? Do they take initiative? Do they take personal responsibility? Do they have ambition? Are they adaptable and flexible, or just stuck in their own way? Do they possess leadership skills and talents, and are they willing to learn? If they have these, you really have something to work with and can train them on the rest of it. These are available, and Amy will talk about that more later, where you can find these skill sets that I've identified. It is also important to look at what are the responsibilities you want them to carry out. Be really clear. So what are the top 5 things you want them to do? And then to look at, do they have the skill set to meet your responsibilities? And it is so often, I have seen this throughout my life as a former Vista supervisor and as a trainer for supervisors, that sometimes you get enamored with the personality and you don't match the skill set with what is actually needed to be done. So Amy, I think, will share a little bit about where you can find all of these attractive qualities. Or not. So moving right along. Who, what, when, where, and how. So how do you create a Vista recruitment plan? You've got to begin with the end in mind and plan backwards. So When do you need to have the Vista? What we do know is 120 days before the PSO is the ideal time to recruit a Vista, to start that recruitment process of developing your plan, starting there. But then you also have to look at what else happens then. 120 days is ideal, but if you have Christmas in the middle of it, the Christmas holiday, if you have Thanksgiving in there, and if you've got Labor Day in there, you really need to look at expanding your time frame so that you can get it ready for the 120 days. I have to tell you that one of the biggest challenges that I have experienced, I did experience as a Vista supervisor, was really not remembering that it took 120 days or not being fully aware of that timeline. And I was right at the end crunching, trying to get my Vista in, trying to get all of the paperwork in. And it ended up that they were disappointed they couldn't attend the PSO. Threw our timeline completely off. They were disappointed. I had to go find somebody else because they found something else to do in the meantime. So I just invite you to really think about when it is, just be clear, when is the PSO deadline, and plan backwards from there. Timelines are so critical. Who's going to help you in this recruitment process is another key factor. Are you going to do it alone? Now, you can if you want to try and do this alone. What I also know as a former Vista supervisor is that you don't get paid any extra money for taking on this awesome responsibility of guiding a Vista through this process and mentoring them. So you might need to be clear about, will you get some staff to help you? If you're an intermediary, will you get the sub-site to be involved with this? If you're a single site, will you have a leader to be involved with you? Or will you have staff to be involved? Critical. Who is going to help you with this process and to have time frames to do that? And then look, where do you find good candidates? Where are they out there? Some of them are in your backyard. Some of them are all across the country. But being clear, where do you find them? So now that you've got that part together, how many Vistas do you need? Clear about the PSO date. When are the Vistas going to start? And what's going to be done at each phase of the recruitment process so that you know clearly what needs to be done, who is going to be responsible for getting it done, and a completion date. There's nothing like a plan. If you don't have a plan or a foundation, anything you build will be fine. If you want to have a good Vista and a smooth process with little or no stress or anxiety, a plan is absolutely essential to get that done. So you can also find out more about that on the Vista campus, where there is the recruitment planning resources identified on your screenshot. So what I'd like to ask now is to ask you, because this is going to be quasi-interactive, to ask you who has used the recruitment checklist on vistacampus.gov. So Scott, I think, is going to launch a poll for us so we can get some feedback from you as to whether or not you have or have not used the vistacampus.gov recruitment checklist. So take a moment to respond, either yes or no. And as you do that, I will just give you some more information about what is happening, whether or not it's absolutely important to focus on the recruitment checklist. It really does provide you with information, for those of you who haven't been there, whether you planned the steps to planning and marketing and screening and selecting a Vista. Gives you step-by-step task list so that you can be more engaged with that. So Scott, do you have some results in the poll yet? Well,
Cynthia, we're publishing the poll right now. Just one sec.
Thank you very much. Okay. Don't you love this interactiveness with the yes. Okay. So we will, for those of you that have used it, we'll talk later about what has happened as a result of you using it, and I'd like to get your feedback a little later on so others that have not used it can know. So, Scott, would you like to share the results, please?
Go ahead.
Hi, Cynthia. So it looks like we have about 21% of our attendees have used the recruitment checklist, and about 48% have not used it, and then we had a handful of folks that did not answer. So it sounds like this recruitment checklist could be a new resource for many of our attendees today.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I just want to reinforce it really does work, and it helps keep you guided and focused and on target. So as we move on to looking at some of the elements of the plan, what we do know is that the elements of a plan, if you have more than one person involved, or just you involved, it's important to really look at what are you going to do to find vistas. What's your process going to be? So the plan elements include outlining the marketing, screening, interviewing, and selection steps, step by step. And sometimes we can get stuck on the big picture and do giant steps. I invite you to make it narrow, small, achievable steps with a time frame attached to it so it doesn't get all bogged down and you forget what it's going to take to get it done, and also the time gets away from you. To develop a recruitment checklist, crucial. Be specific. What is it that you want to do, and who is going to do it? When is it going to be done, the timeline? How are you going to track this? How are you going to make sure midway through, where should you be, and if not, what do you do? And then the roles and responsibilities, and above all, to prepare for the interview. It's important to have interview questionnaires available, program information to share with your applicants. Who are you? What are you all about? What difference do you make? Because they're going to be interviewing you just like you're interviewing them. So as we move forward, we look at the timeline that is absolutely critical. You've heard me talk about the 120-day before PSO time frame. So we have, as a part of the Vista campus as well, a very interactive recruitment planning calendar where you just put in your PSO date and the calendar will automatically fill in the dates for what you need to do and when you need to do it. And this is the step-by-step with deadlines attached to it. I can share this is a valuable resource. They didn't have this resource available when I was the Vista supervisor, so I had to struggle through this, but it is absolutely great. So one of the challenges is, again, if you don't plan for it, anything that happens is just fine or not fine. But many problems and anxieties can come about because you don't have the vistas there on time and they're disappointed. And that really doesn't start out well for anyone. So I want to ask a question. Again, we're going into the interactive part of this. So I have a chat question. So what have been some of your challenges with Vista recruitment? And we'd like for you to enter your ideas in the chat box and make sure that you send to all participants. Just jot down what have been some of your challenges with Vista recruitment. So I'm going to wait for you to just jot those in. I'll tell you some of mine while you're putting yours in. I recruited someone who I knew needed to be, well, their narrative said that they were a good public speaker and a great writer, but in actuality, they were an introvert. And the introvert was being recruited for a position where they had to go out and speak to the community members and community programs, and they were frightened and could not get any words out. They knew the knowledge, but they could not communicate that or articulate it with confidence. As a result, our program did not look good, and I had to end up changing that responsibility to someone else. But I probably should have known, because I probably should have interviewed them more at the beginning. I didn't. I learned from that, though. So if you have a responsibility that requires them to speak in front of the public, how are you going to assess whether or not you have the right person to do that? Everything they put in that narrative does not necessarily mean they can do that. So either way, to ferret this out is absolutely essential. So do we have any information in for the chat box?
We do, Cynthia. This is Jessica. So a couple of things that people have expressed there been challenges for them. Some challenges have been recruiting locally as they live in a pretty rural community. Compassion for clients that they serve. Other ones are trying to find a strong candidate pool along the same lines as there's few local candidates. And also starting 2 months out was another one that was also listed.
Okay. Okay. Well, that gives us some good information. Well, while we're on this topic, let me just focus on, this takes us to marketing so we can move forward. Let's talk about the marketing, and I'm going to look at it from the perspective of addressing some of these issues you've mentioned as well. But first, I'll start with the believable bad. You will have a session next month. I believe the next webinar will be focused on creating a well-written bad, and that's critical. That becomes the job description for your Vista. What is it they're expected to do, when, where, and how? Don't put the whole kitchen sink in there. Make it believable for 1 year, because Anxiety City lives there. I trained so many visitors at the PSO. They come in, they are overwhelmed, they are full of anxiety because the supervisors have put too much information in that bad for that 1 year of service, and it looks like 3 years that they're supposed to get done in 1 year, and they're already anxious about a new beginning, a new opportunity, and you add that to it. Please remember, that is absolutely critical. That's the number one problem coming into PSOs with the visitors. Getting the bad approved, another opportunity. Once you write a well-written bad, to make sure you go through their approval process with the state office in a timely manner, and to match the personal competencies with the needs that you have. Your recruitment message, and I want to tie in here the concerns that have come up so far. Local recruitment, that is an issue, and it is. Where do you find good candidates that are local? And thinking through, where would you go? If you live there locally, you have the passion for national service or community service, where would you go find the people? Would you go to the houses of worship? Would you go to civic organizations? Would you go to other nonprofit organizations? Would you go to your network, your friends, your community centers? Where would you go to find these people? Where would you find people with compassion? Yes, you can find people all over the country that can come and do this because they have a vested interest for some reason in moving to your locale. But where do you find a candidate pool close by? Again, houses of worship, community centers, nonprofit organizations, civic organizations, your network. Where are these people? And also, what do you say to them? What is that message that you're giving out? Are you giving out a message that says that you are located in Middle America and you're a nonprofit organization that deals with X, Y, and Z? Or do you make it exciting? Do you make it appealing? Do you give it a teaser so that they feel like they want to know more about it and want to get involved and want to be a part of what you're doing? Are you speaking to them? What's in it for them? Are you speaking to that? Remembering all of this is important. It's not just what you need. What do they need as well? So your recruitment message, which takes us to the next slide of looking at, so who are you? And where are you located? What will the members do? And you got to make it interesting. You can't be just the same old blah, blah, blah. Remember, you're getting a national resource, a person who is getting a stipend at the poverty level. They want to make a difference, and it's something in it for them. The employment is getting much better in this country now. It's up 11%. And it is, the unemployment is down, employment is up. The economy is much better, which means that people they're looking for jobs and being hired for jobs. So some of the same people that were available 5 years ago are no longer available because they're getting other sources of ways of meeting their needs. But you still have that pool of people who are interested in national service for whatever reason, whether they want to go to graduate school and this is something in between because they want to get experience, this is something in between, or they want to just be of national service and want to get some grounding with this. Whatever their reasoning is, and you need to find out what it is so you can know where to go and identify people. Whatever it is, you need to speak to that. So what are the attributes and the skills you're looking for, and how to tie all of this together? Why should they be a part of your project? Why should they not go to some corporation? What makes a difference with what they're doing for you or your program? How do you take it to the next level so you speak to what they need? What are your start dates and your end dates? I've seen too many that some visitors come, they don't know when they're going to start. Nor do they have very good stats. And how does someone get more information? Where's your phone, email, or your mail address to get that done? So it is just something critical to consider now as we look at the next part of this, identifying your marketing strategy. So what are those strategies? Where do you make those connections? Your network, and it was mentioned that you wanted to find people with compassion within your network. Where would you find people with compassion? Where are those people, where are there a gathering of those people, or one or two, or 6 degrees of separation, someone who knows someone that knows someone else. It's a process. How do you develop the message just for those people? If you're in a small community, and we're at one of my projects, I was in a small community, a rural town of 3,000 people, and volunteering was something people did when they felt like it, but not on an ongoing basis like a Vista. And to find someone who wanted to do this meant I had to go to the community college or to the 4-year institution or to look at the houses of worship. Where do you find people that can meet your need? And how then do you submit it and get approved for your opportunity listing with the state office? And following that, tracking that, just because you submit it doesn't mean that it's going to go through in a timely process for you. You have a responsibility to follow that all the way through because you want the Vista to come when you need them to be there. So as we move forward, we look at how posting your listing. So as we look at the next slide, posting your listing and then advertising the position, either by word of mouth, online, or in print, in your locations. Be prepared also to market your program to the candidates. And that I can just share that is so critical. The next slide does focus on what's in it for them. Be clear about your advertising. So often we look at what's in it for us. What do they get out of it? And if you can identify some key points of things that you think that a person would get out of serving for your program, and then speak to that when you advertise it. How to position this opportunity as a win-win. What's in it for them, what's in it for you? What does everybody get out of this? And be clear and get feedback to ensure that you understand that the person has the skills, desired characteristics, and that this is something, everybody's clear about what needs to be done, who, when, what, where, and how. Clarity, 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 absolutely essential. So now I have the question of asking a quick poll. So which of these marketing techniques have worked well for you? And we have several that Scott is going to launch. And if you could just click on, and you can choose more than one if you want, to identify which ones of these have worked well for you in as a marketing strategy. So we will take a moment for you to identify those. And I can say, while we're doing that, I can speak to the local recruitment. While my AmeriCorps portal was great, what may work just as well in local communities is Facebook, your word of mouth, sometimes Twitter. That's in just when you're looking for local recruitment. National, of course, you can use all of these. Local is probably a little more challenging, especially for smaller communities and smaller rural communities as well. So, Scott, do we have some results from our poll yet?
The system is calculating results. It'll be about 5 seconds.
Okay, 5 seconds and coming up. So we will wait for the counting. Oh, there it is. Okay, good, Scott. So it looks like my AmeriCorps portal was the one, well, it's between that and not sure, but I will start tracking. or no answer at all. No, actually, no answer at all. Okay, so the strongest one of the people that have responded is My AmeriCorps portal and word of mouth. Oh, okay, that's cool. Okay, and yeah, okay, those are cool. And you may want to consider these other ones that may also help you for those of you that are having challenges. In addition to those, you may want to consider the other ones as well that may be able to assist you. So, having looked at the marketing, now let's go to the next component, and that will be to screen. Knowing the terms and conditions of service. I can't tell you how important that is. And this is information that is on vistacampus.gov. This is information that is reviewed by the Vistas once they've come on board. You need to look at it before they come on board because they're going to ask you questions. And you will need to have some answers. We'll talk later about the hotline that is available, the National Service Hotline is available for questions you don't have the answer to, but there's some basic ones that you may need to be familiar with or at least know how to direct them to. And that is critical. Some Vistas that I've seen didn't know that they were supposed to be, they could not be a Vista and at the same time go work in someone's campaign, and to do that with their Vista shirt on, that caused a lot of problems. To be the supervisor to know that, to know this information in advance will really help them because questions will come up. And it's better to give them factual information or identify and investigate where you can get the answer from. So just knowing what the terms and conditions of service are is very important. Pre-screening your applicants. So to understand phone calls, you can get a little bit of information from the phone calls. How will you find out if you need a person who can write proposals to secure grants, whether or not they actually can do that, or the writing sample they submitted is from their brother or their sister? Or if their writing is more flowery and you need writing that's more business-focused for proposal writing. How do you find that out to make sure that you have the right person for the job or for the service opportunity? And to also to talk about the living allowance, what is that all about, and how they may have to budget their money. That's important for round one before they get too far, before you waste too much time and they waste too much time. What is actually involved in this service opportunity, and what's in it for them? What will they get out of it? And then you narrow your list of applicants. And moving right along, then as you narrow your list of applicants, you then go into round two. You review and you rate those applicants and look at their materials to make sure that everything is in order. Go to round three. Now, some people have been known to skip one of these rounds, which you can do depending on how many applicants you have and how many people you have working with you. You may combine round 2 and 3 if necessary. But you then we're moving forward to conduct the first round of interviews, and knowing that this is absolutely crucial, that you understand that you, as you conduct the interviews, that when you conduct the interviews with your first and second round interview, that you make sure that you stay connected to the folks. Because once you identify the people that you want to serve, because as you're going through round 1 and 2, you really are narrowing your list, and you're getting a pretty good idea of who you want to be with you. And if you, by chance, have a very strong candidate and someone that is not quite so strong but really good second person, you really want to stay in contact with both of them. If you offer the position to the top person, you need a backup candidate because life happens. And so how to make sure that you keep both of them engaged while at the same time being honest with them. And that is absolutely critical, to be honest with the backup. So I think Amy has a link for some interview questions. She's going to share with us a link for interview questions that you may want to take advantage of.
Thanks, Cynthia. I've put several links in the chat panel for different resources that Cynthia has mentioned, so check that out. They're all available on the Vista campus under Supervisors.
Thank you, Amy. And then let's look at conducting reference checks. Well, as you would with any position, what is a reference? And who is a reference? And how good is that reference? And to make sure the reference is not their uncle, aunt, brother, sister. Credible reference. And here's the opportunity as you're talking to the reference as well as the candidate to really ask behavioral type interview questions. It is not just did you do this or did you do this, to ask them to talk about what was their experience, what did they do, how did they handle the situation, did they have this experience, and if so, how did they handle it, did they have a challenge, how did they handle it, which really gets you into understanding what they're capable of doing. Crucial behavioral type interview questions. And again, as Amy noted, some of these questions are on Vista campus. And so after you've done that, you offer the candidate the position, you outline the next steps for them, what is going to be required, and the timeline and required documentation, and again, making sure you have your backup candidate in place, and sometimes you may have to have two, have backup candidates in place, and you stay connected with them every week into the PSO. I have lost candidates, only two, but two is enough. I've lost candidates because I didn't stay connected. I thought, okay, once every 2 weeks would be enough. The PSO was 6 weeks away because I had done my recruitment. I had finished that process. I had a lot of work to get done, so I'm like, okay, they're on hold. They're good. I can check in with them every 2 weeks. You need to check in with them every week to talk about and to establish a connection, to establish a bond, and to remember if some of them are coming from other parts of the country, what do they need? Do they need housing? Critical if they're moving across country, housing, major anxiety. Can you help them with that? You probably can. You probably have some resources available to at least establish those links for them. Do they know your community? Do they know what's happening in your area? Do they know your program? So every now and then to reach out, what do you need? How are you doing? How is this coming? How is that coming? What questions do you have? Establishing the link and providing a place for them to land when they finish their PSO. Critical if you want the candidate. Now, if you don't want the candidate, you don't have to do anything, and all the time that you have used will be wasted, and no one has time for wasted energy. So, looking at your next steps, what are required next steps? The travel request profile that really gets them registered for the PSO, and direct deposit paperwork. They need to go on to the campus, Vista campus site and log in, and there's some pre-PSO activities that they need to participate in, and to print out their badge to bring the PSO. And let me just share again that they need to have a badge that is clear and concise and not overwhelming to bring the PSO. So as we look at bringing the Vistas on board, we see onboarding is one of the biggest issues. Retaining the members between selection and start date, as I went through that as well. Putting yourself in their place, what is causing the anxiety. And you may want to ask them, do you have an anxiety? And what's the cause of it? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about where you're going to live. Is it that you have the bad that's overwhelming? Let's talk about what you can do. Let's talk about creating a timeline to get everything done on the bad, because now it doesn't come with a timeline. So they can start to map out what is it they're going to do that will reduce the anxiety and get them more comfortable with the position. So it is something important to consider also, looking at as you do the recruitment. As our next slide, let me also mention that if you have a question, you can contact the National Hotline Service Hotline, and the number was there, 1-800-942-2677, for any questions that you may have and you can't answer and the candidates need. So let's look at the supervisor recruitment roles. We have on this call some intermediary supervisors, single site, sub-site supervisors, some leaders, and others who are a part of this call. And we're looking at 3 different roles for recruitment, one with the intermediary recruit. As we're looking at the next one, I'll look at you can recruit a cohort of Vista candidates, and then the sub-sites get the candidates' information, and they rank the top 5. So which of the top 5 do you want to give the information to the site and the proposed ad? And the candidates are rate the top 5 preferred placements. They get to decide, too, where they may want to go and where they may want to serve, and to honor that. And then you allocate the positions to the site, and you get the state office approval. The other way is the sponsors ask the sub-site to recruit. So with this, on our next slide, we have the sub-site submit the applications and the ads to the sponsors. And then the sponsors will allocate the positions, and then the state office approves that. Sub-sites identify, recruit, and interview the candidates, and then the candidates meet with the sponsors to complete the paperwork and to do the final interview. 2 different approaches. It just depends on which way works best for you. And then also to look at the next part to this is that the sponsors then approve the members. The next slide, the sponsors then approve the members' placement, and then the sponsor offers a position after approval from the state office. So finally, which I like, is the hybrid recruitment model. And this one I like it because it's a win-win, but you can decide which way works best for you. If you have intermediary and the sub-site. So the intermediary market screens and interviews the candidates. The sub-sites conduct interviews, the second interviews, and choose their top picks. And then the intermediary and sub-sites work together to finalize the list and to make placements. And just let me share that these are all sample processes that you can use. You can decide whichever one works best for you, but these are some samples that could help get you started in a process. And again, there's more of that on vistacampus.gov. And so as we then look at our next slide, best practices. What we do know, and this comes from information obtained from supervisors and leaders that's been polled. What we do know that it's really best to begin 9 to 16 weeks before the PSO. And starting in the spring works best. Now that works best if you are recruiting college graduates. College graduates, we have, especially with PSOs, the majority of them come around the June, July, August time frame. That's when the bulk of them hit. So you can see where the spring will be the time for recruitment when they're making up their minds. For community-based volunteers, it could be just the fall may be a good time. We've seen more of the fall for community-based volunteers and candidates. It is important to spend some time working on this, and we estimate that 9 hours per week is the average time spent to get good quality candidates. Now, does that mean you have to do all of that? Not necessarily. You could spread that out to other people in your staff or your support group. That you enlist support and get others to help with you. Utilize word of mouth, Twitter, Craigslist, Idealist, and recruit for a specific skill set, traits, and national service interests. If I'm looking for a really good grant writer, they may not have written any proposals, but do they have the ability to write in a way that tells a story, concise, linear, and can follow directions and know how to do the research and how to make the connections? Can they do that? If so, you can teach the rest. And clear, well-written bands, absolutely critical to success. So now what? The now what is you pull it all together. Recruitment is only the beginning. Effective retention is reliant on effective recruitment and ongoing supervision. Absolutely essential. I can just share with you that, again, the way you start out is the way you end up. If you start out with understanding what is required, what's necessary, what do you want, are you clear with them, the candidate that you have, what do they want, what's in it for them, what are they going to get out of this, what are they going to put into this, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, what vision do you want to achieve, have you communicated this to your Vista, are you on the same page, do you have clarity about how you will connect and communicate, and the feedback, if there's conflict, how will you deal with that, the communication strategy, how will you deal with this. All of this is important for the recruitment process, thinking it through in advance so that you can have an effective process throughout. So, again, the way you start out is the way you end up. And I wish you much success as I hit 45 minutes on the nose. Any questions?
Okay, everybody, this is Jessica again. If you want to ask a question, you can ask questions by pressing *1 on your touch-tone phone or by posting in the Q&A or chat boxes. So while you're thinking up questions, we'll bring some that have already come in through the chat. So one question that did come up was, how do you ask someone to be your backup or to be someone else's backup? So, Cynthia, I know that you've had experience. How have you been successful in that?
It is, again, honesty is the best policy. What I've done and what I've also heard other supervisors do as well is that you're clear and you say, you tell them how many slots that you have, and you already have an individual. First, you acknowledge that they are very, very qualified, but you already have a person who you have identified and they've accepted the position. But in the event that they are not able to serve, then you would like them to consider moving into that slot. Now, you've got to give them a time period, a realistic time period of when you will know more about that. And ideally, it will be ideally 2 weeks beforehand that you would know, release them from that, or if they get something else to let you know, but to let someone know that you tell them. Someone else we've selected someone else for the position, but you have great qualities and characteristics. In the event that the other person cannot serve, you would like them to be considered to accept the position. This is a lot easier when there was not full employment in the country. Now that there's growing with the employment, it's a little harder to do, but not impossible. But just how attractive you make the position for them. That has worked for me and for others as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cynthia. A next question from the chat. How long of the 120 days should I give to pre-screening?
It depends on how many people you have to screen. Again, it depends on how many. This is where you do the phone calls and you give them the information about the budget. You could do that. It depends on how many people you have. You could do that in 1 day or 3 days, or since 120 days is not a whole lot of time considering everything else you got to get done. I would say no more than a week, but to do it all within a week. So within a 9-hour period, you should be able to get all of that done. It may be less.
Thank you, Cynthia. And another thing just to keep in mind with regard to how long you should give to pre-screening, you should be prepared to have your candidates enrolled in pre-service orientation, have them selected, approved in the system, placed for their service term, probably about 45 to 50 days before a PSO. So thinking about that and kind of how Cynthia had mentioned, backing up that timeline. If you're thinking you have to get everybody in there by 50 days, that gives you 70 days prior to build that recruitment plan and everything. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. Another question that came in through the chat is, who approves marketing? And I'm assuming that question, and please, Kelly, since you're the one who asked this question, if I get this wrong, please let me know. Is it generally, if you're an intermediary or a sub-site, who approves the marketing approach? And what has been your experience, Cynthia?
Well, if you are an intermediary, you would probably, the intermediary would approve it, but sometimes they could work with the sub-sites to create the marketing approach. If you are a single site, you would approve it. So it's not that necessarily you don't have to go to the state office to get the approval for your marketing. But if you are an intermediary or a sub-site would probably connect with the intermediary to go over the marketing approach and to determine who's going to do what, unless you're doing a hybrid in which you have clarity about that. But it just depends on which process you want to use. Again, the ones that I've recommended, we talked about sample ones, those are just samples. The intermediary, this is a conversation. Intermediary, you can decide you're going to do the marketing. Or it could be that the sub-sites are going to do the marketing. That is a conversation, and you decide which one you want to do and which works best for your organization. But single site, you don't have a question. Yeah.
Cynthia, this is Amy. I just want to jump in here, too, to just add that everything you said about your marketing strategy sounds great. And your state office does need to approve your service opportunity listing that goes into My AmeriCorps. So that is one piece that needs to be approved by your state office. But your overall plan is really up to you. Although I would suggest running it by your state office since they have a lot of experience with this type of work as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Since you're there, do we have any questions in the chat? Okay, well,
Jessica, let me see here. I'm looking through. I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat and Q&A.
Okay, so we can move on to the phone. Operator, is there anybody on the phone?
There are no questions in the queue at this time, but just reminding everyone to ask a question, press *1.
Fantastic. I did see one question pop up here. May I start recruiting in April when they wouldn't attend training until August? Cynthia, do you want to take this one?
You can, and I would, if you have the time to do that, I would recommend that you do that. Again, and it depends on what kind of candidate you're looking for. If you are looking for college graduates, if that is what you're looking for, most definitely, because they are making decisions about what's happening next in their life. Matter of fact, April might be a little late for that, but that's quite appropriate. The other challenge is, again, if you start recruiting then, when do you offer them the position? And then you've got to be clear that when you offer the position, you must stay in touch with them. And that's, if you're doing it that early, you need to also have backups. But staying in touch with them is going to be absolutely critical, because they can, someone comes along and says, okay, for your talent, skills, and abilities, I can pay you $40,000. And off they go. National service is wonderful, but $40,000 might sound better. I don't know that that's the case, but that happens. So just be clear that if you're doing it that far in advance, you've got to be very strong about why they're doing it, what's in it for them, why it's a great opportunity for them to come to your program, and what are they going to get out of this that they can't get anyplace else. Build a very strong case and stay connected. Yes.
Thank you,
And
Cynthia.
we do have a question from Laura Ferrer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Laura.
Oh, hello. Hello.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. What's your question?
Okay, so our project, I'm a Vista leader, and our project recruits all 5 times during the year, so we recruit for every PSO. And since some are so we've had a recruitment in November, in February, and then now coming up in April. And so they're very much back-to-back with very little time. And I was looking at the resources you had mentioned as being good resources for on the Vista campus with the calendar and layouts. But it seems like they're step-by-step as a total process, and we recruit on a rolling basis. So people will be in different parts of the process at any given time, and so I'm having difficulty trying to figure out how that works for each individual recruit person. That makes sense? I just don't know how to do that.
So if you are recruiting for the November PSO starting 120 days in advance for whatever cohort you're doing for the November PSO, you would run that through in terms of having a timeline and a task list of if you're shooting for this PSO, November PSO, when do you need to start? And for each candidate, when do you need to start for that PSO? Then you go to the next PSO, back it up, 120 days, that cohort. When do you need to start? What's the timeline and the task list for them? So that each grouping that you're having, you're recruiting by cohorts. So that group for November, that group for February, that group for.
Well, I was going to say we have a hybrid recruitment model.
Okay.
I guess
so
would I need a recruitment schedule for each individual recruit depending on when they applied?
No, it's more of if you have a hybrid model, if you're still going for the same date for the PSO, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I would think you may want to consider with the hybrid model. Okay, so you're looking for candidates. So with your task list, so we're going with this cohort. Even with the hybrid model, what are you going to be doing first? Mm-hmm. You're going to be doing first with the hybrid model, so the intermediary markets it. If you're marketing as an intermediary for this cohort, you got to do it how far in advance. You got to screen how far in advance. You got to interview candidates how far in advance. They all have to be done by a specific time to get it for the, I'm just going to use November PSO. Okay. Then the sub-sites got to do their part. So when do they conduct the second screening for the November PSO, even with the hybrid model? And then when you make your top picks, and now you've got to come to, so when you both work together to finalize your list and make the placement. And you got to do this within time frame so they can get to that PSO in November. So it's not necessarily for each candidate, but it will be for each grouping. You've got maybe 2 weeks to do the recruitment for this cohort to go to November PSO. You've got 2 weeks to do the screening for this cohort to go to November PSO. So one person may come in the beginning of the week, one may come at the end. You still got to get it all done within that 2 week period.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Great.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia. There was one question that came in through the chat that I saw here, and you touched on a little bit, Cynthia, but I wonder if you could touch a little bit more on this one. How can Vista projects compete with an increase in employment in the U.S.? It seems that there are fewer candidates interested in a Vista position due to the low living allowances. Do you have any tips on how to, I guess, attract people, especially as the economy is improving?
Yeah, that is a challenge. That's a real challenge. Yeah, 5 years ago, it was easy. Let me tell you, 5 years ago, it was overrunning with candidates. You had people coming from everywhere. You could choose from masters and PhDs. You could choose anybody. Now, not so much. So now you got to be more creative. Now we go to what's in it for them. What do they get out of this? And you got to really think creatively and articulate this in a way that really touches something within each person. So what we do know now is that, yes, the economy is improving, but what they want when they come into the jobs now is people to have experience. They can't get experience straight out of school without going through the process. Here's a way they can get experience, and it's how do you present this? They can get experience for whatever it is that you want them to do, planning, organizing, project management, and they get to do all of this, writing, doing social media. How do you present this? You get actual on-the-ground application and experience with doing this so that you can make yourself more marketable. If they want, I've seen people that want to write proposals. Nobody wants to take people on board who don't know, have not written and not been successful, this is a perfect training ground for that. Not only do they get to develop their skills, but they also get to be of national service. So you've got to find a way for identifying what do they get out of this. And the also part to that is they get some, if they choose to, they can get the education award to help pay for some of their college education, past or graduate school. So you got to feed into what's in it for them, what do they get out of this, in addition to being involved in national service and really helping to strengthen our country. That also appeals to a lot of people. So bridging all of that together helps to make a good case for why should they choose national service now. So that's only half of it. Now, if you're in a rural community, you got a bigger challenge. Where are those people? Those people may have gone off to college someplace, and you know their parents, grandparents, aunts, or uncles. How to bring them back to do community service, national service, policy of gaining skills and talents, or how do you do that? And it's really speaking to them and just understanding what's happening in your community and who needs what and where are all these resources. You may have to have some community volunteers that know everything, the ones that gossip all the time, to help you identify people around that may have skill sets that may need to focus and redirect them. You may have gyms within your backyard you don't even know about. You may have a lot of retired people around that may be willing to step in. They don't all have to come straight out of college. Where there's some other people that can fit the bill. Think outside the box.
Thank you for that, Cynthia, and thank you so much for all of your knowledge on this topic. Recruitment can be a hard thing, so we definitely appreciate your expertise and your experience working with recruitment, especially of Vista members. We're right at the hour right now, so we're going to start to wrap things up. There is an evaluation poll, and we want to know what you thought about this webinar. So on the right side of your screen, you will find a poll where you can share feedback about this webinar. Please take the time to answer the questions. We like to be able to improve these webinars, and your input helps us. And once again, thank you all for attending this webinar, and we hope you can join us for our next webinar. Our next webinar is going to be Strengthening VADs and Service Opportunity Listings on February 17th. Check the webinars page under Connect and Learn to sign up for those future webinars. This should be a really good webinar, this next one, so we do encourage everyone to attend, and we hope to see you again soon.